When I was sold for the first time, I realized a person can lose everything, even their name. They took it from me on the very first day. It was terrifying, as if God Himself had turned away from me. They gave me a new name, short and foreign, that made me feel cold inside. But I kept whispering my old name at night, so I wouldn't forget, so I'd remember who I was before they took me from my home. My real name is Sarah. I was born on a small farm in Georgia, where every morning smelled of smoke and fresh bread, and every evening my mother sang soft songs that calmed even the thunder. Our farm was poor but free, until one day my father lost everything in a card game. I didn't know he had wagered me, his daughter. When they came for me, no one told me the truth. No one explained why my mother cried, as if she were burying me alive. Only later, on the road, I learned that my father had given me away to pay off his debts. He didn't even look me in the eye when he said goodbye. Now I live in a stranger's house in Louisiana, where every morning begins with heaviness and fear. My work is the kitchen and the house. It seems like the kitchen is the warmest place, but it's also the one with the most tears. The smell of boiled corn, fried bacon, the hot steam that scalds the hands, that's my everyday world. Sometimes, when the mistress walks out into the garden, I quickly go to the window and look at the sky. It always looks different here, not as blue as it was back home. As if even the sky doesn't want to be free here. The work begins in darkness. I wake up before dawn and go to light the stove. The firewood is always wet because the master doesn't care about the slaves. He says, "If you can't handle this, then what are you even here for?" I've learned to endure in silence, even though those words cut deeper than the whip. One morning, the stove wouldn't light. I prayed. I begged God, but the wood was so damp that my tears dripped to the floor, mixing with the ashes. When the master came in, he said nothing, he just looked. Then the overseer came. I heard him approaching. His steps were heavy, confident. He always walks with a whip, which he isn't afraid to use. He doesn't love us, and he doesn't hate us. We are just things to him. He took me outside, in front of the others. When the first lash scorched my back, I didn't even scream. I didn't give him that satisfaction. I looked up at the sky, where birds were freer than I would ever be. Every blow reminded me how cruel a person can be when they believe they own someone else. But there were moments of light that saved me. In the evenings, we gathered on the porch of the cabin and told stories. Someone would recall their home. Someone else spoke of a love they had to leave behind. There was an old man among us named Isaac, who seemed to know everything in the world. His words were always mysterious and deep, as if he spoke with time itself. One day he said to me, "Sarah, remember, as long as hope lives inside you, no one can break you completely. The soul is stronger than the body, and that is its power." Those words echoed in me every night when I lay down to sleep, wrapped in a thin blanket, looking at the moon through the crack in the roof. I asked God why it was like this. Why me? Sometimes it seemed like he didn't hear me. Sometimes I felt ashamed for doubting his wisdom. It was here, in this daily torment and brief minutes of peace, that I came to understand what it truly means to live, what it means to fight, even when it seems impossible to go on. And I realized that slavery can take a person's body, but it can never fully take their dreams. Inside me lives the dream of freedom. I don't know if I will ever see it with my own eyes, but I believe that one day someone among us will walk through those gates, not as a slave, but as a human being. Free, proud, with a name that no one will ever take away. That night, after the punishment, I couldn't sleep for a long time. My back was burning, breathing was hard, but what hurt the most was my soul. I lay there and listened as someone cried softly in the neighboring cabin. It was Mary, a young girl who had just arrived on the plantation. She wasn't even 16. Small, fragile, with eyes that still held innocence. She missed her mother and said she heard her voice every night. I didn't know what to say. I simply called her over quietly and hugged her. Sometimes the only thing we can give each other is the warmth of our bodies and the silence where compassion hides. In the morning, everything began as usual. No one spoke about what had happened the day before. In this house, pain is like air. It's not discussed, not remembered. It is simply breathed in. We were back in the kitchen, slicing bread, cooking beans, listening to the sounds outside. When guests arrived, the tension always rose. The master would grow nervous. The mistress yelled more than usual. And we knew one misplaced dish, one awkward movement could lead to disaster. I saw Thomas, the boy who swept the yard, drop a bucket of water as a white man in a top hat approached the house. He was important, loud, and unpleasant. Thomas froze. Then he began picking up the bucket and scooping up the spilled water with his hands. The man laughed and said, "Now, that's a good Negro. Even scoops up puddles with his hands." I felt something ancient and wild tighten inside me. I wanted to rush at him, to hit him, to scream, but I knew one word, one look, and Thomas would be sold. Or worse. Sometimes strength is knowing how to hold back. A couple of weeks later, something strange happened. The mistress began acting unusually. She often stared out the window, stayed silent for long periods, and sometimes forgot what she had just said. I noticed one day that she took my hand and didn't let go. Her palm was cold, and her gaze lost. She whispered, "I used to dream once too." Then she suddenly stood up and left, as if frightened by her own words. I didn't know what was happening to her, but I felt a storm was building in the house. That evening the old nanny called me over. Her name was Agatha. She had worked in this house for many years and had seen the mistress grow up. Agatha quietly told me, "She's pregnant, but she's afraid the child isn't her husband's." I flinched. Those words could cost lives, hers and mine, if repeated. But Agatha looked serious. "Stay close to her. Right now, she needs you more than all the white doctors put together." From that day on, the mistress began calling me into her bedroom more often. I brought her food, washed her, sometimes just sat nearby. And one day, she suddenly began to cry. Not from pain, but from exhaustion. She said, "You think I'm free? You think I can do anything I want? I'm in a cage, too, just a gilded one." In that moment, for the first time, I saw her as a woman, not an enemy. She was broken in a different way, but broken nonetheless. And I felt pity and something like understanding. One night, people stormed into the house. They shouted, broke doors, demanded something. I hid under the stairs with Mary and Thomas. We heard someone being beaten, the mistress screaming, the master signing something. Later we learned they were debt collectors. The master had lost money, just like my father once did, and now they came to claim it. And there was nothing left to pay with. The plantation was at risk of being sold. In the morning, the separation began. Slaves were counted, discussed, assigned. Some families were torn apart right before our eyes. Old Agatha was taken first. I tried to grab her hand, but a man in blue pushed me so hard I hit a post. Agatha turned back, and on her face there were no tears, no fear. Only these words, "Remember everything. Everything you see. Tell it. One day." She left, forever. From that day on, I began recording everything in my memory. Every name, every detail. I don't know if I will live to see freedom. But if someone someday hears this voice, let them know it all happened. All of it was real, and all of it must be remembered. After the day they took Agatha away, Everything in the house seemed to shift. It felt like the walls had become thinner and footsteps louder. Even the air had changed, tense, watchful. We all lived in anticipation of something terrible. Mary couldn't sleep at night. She whispered that she heard someone calling her name, like her mother's voice. I held her close and tried to soothe her, the way my mother used to when storms shattered the sky into pieces. And then, one day, Esther disappeared. She was quiet but strong, always walked with a straight back, even when her legs trembled from exhaustion. No one saw her that evening or the next morning. At first, we thought she had been sold, but no one came with papers, no wagon took her away, no names were called. Just silence. I felt this wasn't a sale. It was a disappearance, and it hung in the air like a threat to every one of us. That night, I prayed. For the first time in a long time, not just in my head, but out loud. I sat in the corner near the stove, whispered words in broken English mixed with childhood songs, and my tears fell into the ashes. I begged God to show me if there was anything human left inside me. Because sometimes I felt I was no longer a woman, no longer a daughter, no longer a person. Just hands that wash, scrub, carry. Just a back that could be bent. Just a shadow. But the next day, something unexpected happened. They called me to the mistress's room, where a doctor was present. She couldn't get out of bed. Her face was whiter than the sheet. The doctor whispered to the master that the childbirth would be difficult. Then he looked away and said quietly, almost without glancing at me, "Let this girl stay. She trusts her." So I stayed, days and nights without sleep. I held the water, brought cloths, cleaned blood. I heard the mistress call for her mother, for me, for God. And when the child came, everything suddenly fell silent. The baby had light skin, too light, like the master himself. But the eyes were gray, like the man in the top hat. The master looked at the child and said nothing. He just walked out, and the mistress cried, not from happiness. She asked me not to show the baby to anyone. She asked me to stay silent. And I did. I knew this was her burden, and I had my own. The baby was named N. I raised her like my own. She was quiet, serious. She didn't play with the other children, didn't throw tantrums. She often asked me to tell her stories. And I did, not about slavery, not about pain, about stars, about a home where women sing while cooking, about a tree that grows flowers smelling of honey and rain. She would listen and say, "I want to go there. When I grow up, I'll find that place." And I believed her, because her voice carried freedom. But freedom, she is fickle. She doesn't come when you want her to. She doesn't come just because you wait. One night, someone set fire to the cabin where the men slept. The whole corner of the yard went up in flames. We rushed with buckets, with rags, but the wind worked against us. The fire roared like a beast. In the morning, they found Josh's body, strong, kind, the one who always said, "We're not things. We're just lost in time." I stood and watched as they covered him with burlap, and I couldn't cry. The tears had vanished forever. The master said it was revenge, that someone among us had set the house on fire on purpose, and the interrogations began. The overseer walked with a whip, as if it decided on its own who to punish. They weren't looking for the guilty, they assigned them. 3 were beaten. 1 boy didn't get back up. They didn't even bury him, just dragged him into the woods. And I looked at Anne, a little girl with eyes like the sky after the rain. She held my hand and whispered, "Why are they so cruel?" And I didn't know what to answer, because I no longer understood where good ended and evil began. Everything had blended together, like clay under the rain. The only thing I knew, I had to live. For her. for memory, for all those who were already gone. I kept whispering my name, Sarah, to remember who I had been and who I still could become. Sometimes I think memory is all we truly have left. Not land, not possessions, not even our bodies. Only fragments of voices, of touches, of scents. I still remember how my mother's shoulder smelled when she held me close. A mix of sweat, cornmeal, and sun. That smell never left, even when everything else did. And I tried to speak not as a slave, but as a woman. I couldn't give her freedom, but I could give her words. Words that would help her grow up unbroken. She listened with such attention, as if I were reading her a message from another world. Sometimes she asked, "Were you ever free?" I would nod. "What is it like to be free?" I would look out the window and answer, "It's when you wake up and you're not afraid of who's going to call you today. It's when your own voice doesn't scare you." But my voice, it often trembled, especially when the buying began. One time, early in the spring, a man in fine clothes came to the house, with a gold watch and a heavy ring. He looked at us like items in a shop. He touched our hands, checked our teeth. He stopped in front of Mary. She stood still, like stone. Her eyes were empty. He said, "I'll take this one." The master nodded without looking up. And that was it. Mary was gone. We didn't know where they took her, with whom, for how much. Only later I heard the mistress whisper into her pillow, "They sell us like horses, like junk, and then they wonder why we lose our minds." More and more often I caught myself becoming a shadow, moving soundlessly, thinking in fragments, speaking only what was necessary. The body lived, the soul waited. But one day the soul spoke loudly. It was summer, during the harvest celebration. Guests came to the plantation. Loud, full-bellied, smelling of wine and perfume. We prepared food for 2 days. The kitchen boiled like a cauldron. I was running barefoot across the burning floor, holding a tray, with turkey against my chest. And suddenly I heard a scream. A woman's scream. Deep. Soundless. I rushed to the house. In one of the upstairs rooms stood Anne. She was covering her face with her hands. In front of her, that same man with the gold ring. I saw his back. He turned around, and his gaze held too much confidence. I don't know what came over me. I grabbed the nearest lamp and threw it at him. It missed, but he stumbled back and slipped out of the room and ran downstairs. I knew there would be consequences, but inside there was a stillness, as if, for the first time, everything was right. That evening the master came to me. He didn't yell. He simply said, "You crossed the line, and you know what that means." I nodded. He nodded. We both knew. They took me to the barn. 3 were already there. One held a rope, another a whip. The third stood aside, smoking, waiting for the signal. I won't describe what happened. Some things are not meant for words. I will only say my soul left my body. But it didn't go far. It stayed close, watching how the body bent, how the skin cracked. But inside, silence. And in that silence, I heard a voice. It was mine, old, forgotten, strong. "You are not a thing. You are light, even in this darkness." When they let me go, I couldn't walk. But I didn't fall. I crawled. To the door. To the bed. To myself. And now I write this story again. Not with ink, with memory. So it will remain. So someone, someday, will know. I lived. I fought. I loved. Many days have passed since then. I no longer count them. Time in captivity does not move. It stands still like a wounded horse. But something inside me has changed. Not on the outside. No, my body remains fragile, tired, covered in scars. But inside, it's as if a tree has grown. Born from pain. and each of its leaves is a name of someone who disappeared, a name of someone who endured, a name of someone who fought, even in silence. I am still alive, and that alone is an act of resistance. I speak in a whisper, but in that whisper, there is truth. And truth, even spoken by half-broken lips, is stronger than 100 lies shouted at full volume. And has grown. She has become beautiful, not with the quietness of a slave, but truly with fire in her eyes. She already understands what this house means, what our fate means. Sometimes I see her looking out the window the same way I once did, and my heart tightens. I know that soon she will want to run. I would have done it myself, but my legs no longer obey me. My body belongs to the earth now, but my soul, no. My soul wanders with the wind. It's already far away, perhaps somewhere beyond the hills, where people live not by chains, but by love. I pray that one day, and we'll be there. Recently, one of the young men approached me, Ben. He works in the stables, quiet, with hands that smell of hay. He asked, "Sarah, is it true that out there's a place with no slavery?" I nodded. "How do you get there?" he whispered. And I looked him straight in the eyes and said, "First, you must get there here," and I pointed to my chest. He understood. Then he leaned down and said, "We're leaving. In a week. There's a way through the swamp. If you want, I'll carry you." I smiled. Not sadly, not with despair. Calmly. "No, son. My road is here. But you go. Go for all of us." I gave him an old rag doll I had sewn for, and, "If you make it, if you build a home, let this be your daughter's first toy." He didn't answer. He just pressed it to his heart and left. 3 days later, Ben was gone. They found him in the woods. No words. No eyes. Only the doll in his hand. I didn't scream. I have no scream left. And screamed. So loud the birds flew from the trees. She thrashed like a bird in a cage. And then something broke inside her. I saw the light in her eyes go out. Not completely, but as if it had sunk deep down, hiding itself to survive. I was afraid she would become like us. Numb. Resigned. Half dead. But one morning I woke up, and she was gone. She didn't say goodbye. Left no note. Just vanished. I waited in fear. 1 day. 2. A week. But she wasn't brought back. Wasn't punished. Wasn't found. And then I understood she had made it. Somewhere out there, far away, there is now a girl with gray eyes who remembers my stories. Remembers how the corn smelled in the kitchen, how the bowl clinked in her hands. And maybe when she becomes a woman, she'll tell her children that once there was someone named Sarah, that she whispered prayers even when her tongue could no longer move, that she passed on the light even when her own flame was nearly gone. I don't know how much time I have left. Maybe a day, maybe a winter, but I am no longer afraid. Every evening, I sit by the wall, leaning against the boards, and look through a crack at the sky. Sometimes it seems I see her, a small figure running through the grass, laughing, singing. Or maybe it's just a memory. Or maybe a soul come to say, I am free. I am alive. If you hear me, it means my song is not dead. It means the ashes are still warm. It means someone remembered. Remember me, not as a slave, but as a woman who lived, who fought, who loved, and who, despite everything, remained herself.